This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 451, Just Say Drupal. This episode of Talking Drupal is sponsored by Hero Devs. On today's show, we're talking about Drupal marketing with version numbers, what competitors are doing, and learning to just say Drupal with our guest, Ivan Stegic. We'll also cover trash as our module of the week. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Our guest today is Ivan Stegic. Ivan is the CEO of 10.7, a value-driven UX and Drupal development agency whose mission is to make things that matter. He lives in Minneapolis with his wife, kids, and 2 dogs, is a huge Minnesota Twins fan, a relentless ambassador for technology, science, and common sense, and an eternal optimist. Ivan, welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Eternal optimist. I love it.
We're going to pause here for a second just so I can... how are the Minnesota Twins doing this season?
Actually, they're doing great. They just recently had a 13-game run of wins. So
man, that must be nice. As a Boston Red Sox fan, I do not know what that looks like. So
we have a Yankees series coming up here, so I think John would be very interested in knowing that.
Speaking of trash, those guys have fallen from grace quite quickly. So
I just want to know who saw the aurora this weekend, because it was much further south than usual.
It was in Minneapolis. It was absolutely gorgeous. Yes.
It was visible here where I am, but I had caught the red eye back from DrupalCon, so I was like conked out by dark that night, unfortunately. So
I missed it the first night, and I saw a less impressive version of it the next night, but still happy I saw it. And
moving into our other introductions, I'm John Picozzi, Solutions Architect at EPAM, and joining me today, Matthew Grasmick, Senior Director of Product, CMS Strategy at Acquia.
Oh, hello. I gave the visual, but not the audio.
And I was looking at my screen, so I didn't even see you wave. Hello, Matthew. And also, last but certainly not least, Nick Laughlin, founder at Enlightened Development.
Good morning. Happy to be here. Our patrons will know that we are chomping at the bit to talk about today's topic, because we kept having to cut ourselves off. So if you're interested in becoming a patron and hearing those discussions, learn more about that after the show.
Yeah, you'll also in that feed see me crawl under my desk, which is amusing. Nick, were you able to see Northern Lights in middle Massachusetts?
Only with the camera. So you could see them, but they kind of look like clouds, and then you took a picture of it and you could see all the colors. So
interesting.
And then we spent about half an hour trying to drive out of the city, because we figured it'd be easier to see, and the clouds came in. So
we better than an eclipse, or what?
Yes, because I've seen 4 or 5 eclipses in my life, and I've never seen the Northern Lights. So I don't feel
like they made it down here to Southern Rhode Island, and if they did, I didn't see them because I live in the woods and there are trees.
They made it to Florida.
What?
So it was one of the big.
Clearly, I wasn't looking hard enough.
Event.
Not very northern anymore. Just lights now.
And last but not least on the introduction train, let's turn it over to Martin Anderson Klutz, a senior solutions engineer at Acquia and a maintainer of a number of modules of his own, to talk about our module of the week. Take it away, Martin.
Thanks, John. Have you ever wanted your Drupal site to have a trash bin for content entities so they wouldn't be immediately deleted from the database? There's a module for that. It's called Trash, and it was created in February of 2008 by Rutzi, though recent releases are by Andre Matescu of Tag 1. It has a 3.0.3 version available, which is compatible with Drupal 9, 10, and 11. It is actively maintained. In fact, that release is less than 2 months old, and it also has security and test coverage. It has 7 open issues, 3 of which are bugs, which is pretty impressive considering it's in use by almost 1,900 sites, according to Drupal.org. Now, once the module is installed, you choose which entity types on your site should use the new trash storage. And for all the configured entities, deleting a piece of content then moves it into the new trash storage along with a timestamp set for when it went into the trash. You can configure whether or not the trash should be automatically purged on a periodic basis, and if so, how often that should happen. It seems that there are some entities for which the trash module currently excludes its functionality, such as users, comments, taxonomy terms, and so on. The note in the code indicates that more testing is needed, so any of our listeners who want to use trash entities for any of those types can try out patching the trash settings form class and on a local copy and provide feedback based on how things work. The ability to restore deleted content is a request I've heard a number of times from people interested in Drupal. So this could really be a useful module for making Drupal work in ways that certain teams expect. And let's talk about the trash module.
Yeah. So my first question would be, does it introduce additional permissions and views kind of shenanigans that you have to do? Because like it's another status like publish, unpublished. Now it's trashed or deleted. I imagine it handles that situation.
So it looks like it does introduce, it looks like at least 3 new permissions around administering trash, viewing things in the trash, and viewing deleted entities, as well as something that looks like it's a little bit more dynamic. So I imagine you can set it even per entity type.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah, what's the data model for this? What's the relationship between being deleted and revisions and actual published versus not published status?
So it does add a new base field, which is where it stores that timestamp for when something goes into the trash. And then it also looks like it adds new storage to the different entities where it's enabled. But yeah, I'm not 100% clear, to be honest, on the relationship with revisions. I have a feeling it sort of uses it as a new way to exclude things from sort of, the way you would commonly access entities, so that, all of the revision history should be preserved, but definitely something worth digging more into.
Yeah, I'd be interested in like, is it still published if it's in the trash? And what does it do to a view that's filtering on published versus not published? That sort of thing.
So many questions about the trash.
And then my next question would be, what happens to paragraphs? Because revisions always get, especially with like multilingual stuff, like can you trash just a particular translation, or like
this feels like one of those modules that could make your database very large very quickly.
Yeah, I thought it was also interesting in the form where it sort of defines which entities it can or can't be used against. It uses sort of a deny list to say these are certain ones that the author knows can't be used, which seems like there's maybe the opportunity for it to maybe inadvertently be used against entity types that maybe it hasn't been tested against. I almost wonder if it would have been better to do more of like an allow list to say these are the ones it's been tested for, rather than going the other way around. But it'd be interesting for somebody to play around with it and provide us with some feedback on that.
I know what Nick's doing after the show today.
Absolutely not. I only test things that I open myself up for.
All right, Martin, thank you for that enlightening module. And if folks wanted to suggest a module or just generally get a hold of you, how could they do that?
So actually, trash is a module that was nominated by one of our listeners on Drupal Slack. So if anyone listening wants to nominate a module of their own that they'd like to hear talked about, they can drop a nomination in the Talking Drupal channel of the Drupal Slack, or reach out to me directly via any of the Drupal or social channels. They can find me as Mandclue.
Great. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you.
This episode of Talking Drupal is sponsored by Hero Devs. Let's talk about life after Drupal 7 end of life. Since August 2023, there has been a lot of discussion around Drupal 7's official end of life in January 2025. It's no secret that many companies, organizations, and individuals are still on Drupal 7 and have yet to migrate. I think we can all agree that migration, while beneficial, is not always feasible. This is where Hero Devs comes in. Hero Devs has partnered with core team maintainers of Drupal 7 to build and maintain their Drupal 7 never-ending support product, ensuring the same quality of support you have come to expect over the years. Drupal 7 never-ending support, or NES, allows for an effortless transition, allowing your site to remain secure, compliant, and compatible after Drupal 7 goes end of life. This allows you to migrate on your own time, or potentially not at all. Hero Devs promises to keep Drupal 7 alive and well, even offering support for the current top 100 Drupal 7 modules. If you'd like to know more about Drupal 7 never-ending support, visit herodevs.com. That's HERODEVS.com. All right, let's move on to our primary topic. And Ivan, just as a primer for the audience here, can you give us kind of what's the premise of Just Say Drupal?
Well, the premise is that we are using the version number in the name of our product, and it's confusing. And it's confusing because we effectively have two different versions, and they're very different. We've evolved one version quite considerably, and I think the market has changed. Moreover, I think that clients don't really care about the version number. They just want the latest and greatest, and they want to know it's secure, and they want ease of use. Mm-hmm. And I think having it just be Drupal is the easiest kind of ease of use you can get. I also think that the community, the more general community, not the Drupal community, but the community of content management systems, if you do a survey of whether they all use version numbers in their names, you find that they actually don't. And so from that perspective, I think we're behind the times. So the premise of Just Say Drupal is, I don't really think we need a version number in our name, and I think it's causing confusion.
It's interesting because you say two versions of Drupal, but in reality, right? There's Drupal 7, which is not long for this world. Drupal 8, which is out of the picture, right? Drupal 9, Drupal 10, and Drupal 11, which is yet to come, right? So, two versions are kind of like Drupal 7 and whatever the latest version is, right? But there are also a lot. It feels like there's a lot in between there, right?
I'm going to push back on you. So, like, Drupal 7, you said, is not going to be long for this world, but that's not really true. The reality is Drupal 7 is going to be around for a long, long time. And it needs to be around because of the businesses that are using them. And the idea that we're going to be rid of Drupal 7 in January of next year is false. It's going to be around. So one thing. Second thing, I don't if you look at the numbers of how many versions of Drupal are installed, I think you're going to find that the majority of sites are on the latest version of Drupal 10. And that's a testament to us as a community to making it easy to go from 8 to 9 or 9 to 10. Easier as it gets, right? So I'd say tip of Drupal is the latest version, and legacy Drupal is what we have around for Drupal 7.
And just a clarification, when you say the majority of sites, you mean the majority of sites on modern Drupal, because the majority of sites are still on Drupal 7, right? Oh no, it flipped actually. Finally.
The majority of sites are not on Drupal 7.
Yeah. No, that's it's finally flipped.
This just into the newsroom.
Yeah. So one of the things we do at Acquia is measure a lot of stuff. So I can take a quick look at just at Acquia, what is the spread of major version numbers? And It's 45% Drupal 10, which is pretty good and the biggest. But Drupal 9 still 20%, and Drupal 7 still about 20%. And these aren't, these numbers have a bunch of qualifiers on them. But it's a good indication. And a lot of people are like you said, Ivan, fine staying on Drupal 7 forever. And a lot of people don't feel pressure to update to Drupal 10 because they can hardly tell the difference.
Yeah. So why do you think it's important then to drop the version numbers? So you mentioned, simplification, but are there other reasons to just start talking about Drupal as Drupal?
Yeah, there are lots of reasons. I would love to say that if you go to justsaydrupal.org, you'll see the post I wrote about it, and that will illuminate where I'm coming from on this. I think the genesis of this is that when I talk to my clients and when I try to sell Drupal as a solution to new clients, all they want to know is that they have the latest and greatest, because to them, that means most secure, easiest to use, going to get my things done in the most efficient way. They are not interested in large capital expenditures to do upgrades. So when you tell them they need to spend 50 or 100K on taking a Drupal 7 site to a Drupal 8 site, they're not interested in that. They love the idea that they can go from Drupal 9 to Drupal 10 and it's going to be an incremental cost and not a capital thing. My belief is that going to Drupal 11 is going to be so much easier than going from Drupal 9 to 10. We've made great leaps in progress going from 8 to 9, 9 to 10, making that easy. I would love to be able to tell my clients and any new clients we get that don't worry about the version number. It's not a thing anymore. You're going to be on the latest and greatest always. No capital expenditure. I know it's going to get easier. And at that point, why are we confusing people with version numbers in our marketing name?
Yeah. I just want to put a really quick aside here for a personal pet issue right now. One of the reasons why Drupal is becoming so much easier to update is because of the Drupal Rector and the Drupal PHP stand projects that are being maintained. There's an issue in the ideas queue that I'll link in the show notes to kind of make that part of the process for deprecations to make it easier for the team that's maintaining that. And I think we talked about it a little bit on the show that we had a couple weeks ago with Matt Glauman. But I think it's critical that the community starts supporting that effort better. So take a look at the issue in the show notes if you're interested in that. So, but yeah, Ivan, I think that's so interesting, because when you're positioning this more as a marketing thing, like an external facing discussion, right?
Yeah, I'm not positioning this as anything internal at all. We have best practices. We release new versions of Drupal that are minor changes every 6 months. We have bigger upgrades every 2 years. That's a best practice. We should not get rid of that. We should continue to rely on patch numbers, on minor versions, on major versions internally as part of the community. This is a no-brainer. That's not what I'm suggesting. So if you're freaking out because I'm saying we should lose version numbers in Drupal, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the general market out there, it's just Drupal. It's a service, effectively. Companies and organizations and nonprofits are buying them from agencies that are maintaining a Drupal CMS. And that's all they care about.
Yeah. So where is it okay versus where is it not okay to say a Drupal version number? For instance, we can take it off of the logo and we take it off of Drupal.org's landing page and we talk about it a little differently. Is that enough? Where do you draw the line?
That's a start. That's definitely a start. And I think if we can start changing the discourse about this, it is a community from the leadership. we will have a much better understanding of the market. People will like us more. They will like the product more because they will understand it more. And I think that will just evolve. Eventually, legacy Drupal won't be a thing anymore.
Legacy Drupal. Wait a second.
Yeah,
Now
yeah.
you're using qualifiers. It's so close to saying Drupal 7.
What's Drupal 7? It's okay. So the reason why I don't say Drupal Classic or Modern Drupal, I don't think we need a qualifier for the latest version of Drupal. It's just Drupal. Just say Drupal. Drupal 7 is a reality that'll stay longer than January of 2025. Hero Devs is here to make sure that's the case, especially for business critical installations for FedRAMP certification and so on. But if we're saying Drupal, there's no reason for us to say Drupal 7. It's legacy Drupal.
I want to just maybe disagree with you a little, maybe agree with you a little. I'm thinking about other technology ecosystems. I know you mentioned CMS. They don't do it. Operating systems do it, mobile and desktop, and some software applications do it. I'm thinking like I'm on a Mac right now. I'm on OS X. I don't really pay attention to what version of OS X I'm on. It was a big deal when OS X came out, and there was a huge divide between OS X and what came before it. It was not a trivial upgrade. In fact, you might need a new machine to be able to run it. So I see the Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 or Drupal 7 and then everything after it as the same divide, where there's a good reason for it to have its own qualifier because it is a different level of effort. There's a seismic change. But since then, like you mentioned, I'd say two things. It's easier to upgrade, so you don't have to think about it. Just like OS X, I don't think about it. I click a button. I don't care what it is because it's easy. The other is it doesn't actually change that much. Like I have to look when I upgrade OS X to like what changed. Like so my photos, I have new buttons next to them that I might use. And since we're in that mode, easier and smaller change, I think it makes sense for modern Drupal to just be Drupal, but to still talk about everything before Drupal 8 as a different thing.
And I think you agreed with me 100%.
Okay. Yeah, it could be Drupal 7
with me at all.
He just did.
That
thing is legacy Drupal, right? Legacy Drupal is kind of where that lives, right? It's
well.
So words have such nuance, and the reason why I'm in favor of saying legacy Drupal as opposed to Drupal 7 is because the community, when they say Drupal 7, they are holding on to it. We are holding on to it. It's something that is a part of us. It came after Drupal 6. It came after Drupal 5. It's harder to let go. Like there's psychology and sociology associated with it.
Interesting.
If you say legacy Drupal, you're immediately positioning it to yourself and to the community as something that is from the past that we're eventually going to have to let go of. You can remember it as Drupal 7 in your dreams, but the positioning is important. It's subtle and it's nuanced, but I do think it's important.
Nobody wants to use a legacy product, so they
not
immediately
negative. Not negative. Not negative. No.
Got it.
And the other reason is putting the word in front of Drupal and not after it is also a subtle change. If you call it Drupal Classic, you're still enabling that version. You're still giving it some sort of stature that's similar to Drupal. If you say legacy Drupal, it's not like the versions are always after the word. It's another subtle change. Like I didn't do that by mistake, right? Like I thought about it.
Yeah.
And everybody loves classic cars, so like
don't make it sound too good.
Well, here's the thing that's interesting to me too, is that, and there's kind of two sides to this. One is, I disagree a little bit with what you said, Matthew, about changes not coming. It's just that they come at a different time. Previously, changes always came in the new major version release, and now the community tries, and the core team tries to do as little change between the last version and the new major version. But there's way more opportunity for changes in the minor version releases. Yeah. So 10.0 to 11 has huge amounts of changes, but they came in 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, 10.4.
Yeah, but I'm saying they're less perceptible. Like, yes, they're there, but it's gradual, and and it's the same way with OS X. Like,
I agree. I agree with that
major and
statement.
minor.
The
That's what makes it
the
make sense to not use the version number.
yes, I agree with that. The thing that concerns me about this, Ivan, always is I feel like, and this is going back to I think what Matthew was saying. Sometimes having a version is nice to be like, hey, something big did change. So how do you communicate? So the question is, how do you communicate if there's a like
Press
there's been
release.
huge
Press
Okay.
release, marketing. Like, you don't need a version number for that. You want to give it a label? Fine, you can give it a label, but like,
Like Sierra or Ventura. Like, you want to
I mean,
start.
even that doesn't really matter. Like, if you want to talk about how this awesome new feature is going to change the lives of all people that use Drupal, awesome. Talk about it. It's coming in February of 2025.
Yeah.
After that, it'll be available. Make sure your agency is up to date security wise, and it'll roll out. Like, you don't
Well,
need a version number.
Like, why do operating systems do it? Like, why does Ubuntu do it? What,
Well,
like, what is the
Okay,
value
so-
in naming
okay.
a thing?
So the
Because-
different. Go ahead,
Go ahead.
John. Sorry.
No, you got this. You go for it.
So the difference there is who's maintaining the site and whether it's local or whether it's a service. That's the fundamental difference. So if you're someone who is maintaining Drupal and building it and installing it and supporting it, you're going to care about the changes between the version numbers. Definitely. And I think that's the same as the person who is installing Ubuntu, who is managing a fleet of Linux machines or Linux servers, and is concerned about the breaking changes between hairy bear and giraffe lizard or whatever they're called. Like, whatever those changes are, they're going to be important, and they're going to be the ones maintaining it.
Yeah.
But to the end user, like, they're not going to care. Like, these are apps on the web. They're always the latest version. And I think that parallel is the same as a Drupal website.
I think you lost me there. Like,
But
they're not apps on the web. Like, a lot of the people are maintaining Drupal, worried about backwards breaking changes. It's not SaaS.
But I mean, like, for an OS, right? Like, there's hardware considerations there. Certain operating systems support certain hardware configurations, right? So I think I don't know that that's necessarily an apples to apples comparison, right? But like, there, as you said, Matthew, right? The future of Drupal is like, hey, we have a pretty stable, reliable upgrade path now where you can roll from Drupal 10 to Drupal 11 to Drupal 12. And like, to the average person, right? That's not going to be, it's going to be transparent. They're not going to know, oh, I'm on Drupal 12. They're just going to say, hey, I have all these new great features. Awesome. To the more technical user, like the four of us, right? We may care that, hey, I'm on Drupal 10 versus Drupal 11 versus Drupal 9, right? Or have reasons why we're on that. So, we're on this version because, PHP, we have an older version of PHP or something like that, right?
But yeah, I think the point is though, is that this is marketing. So we're removing the version number for the people that are getting the site, not for the people that are building the site, right? So my clients generally don't care what version of Drupal they're on, like Ivan is saying, as long as it's the most recent, or as long as, like, they care only when I'm like, hey, we're doing an upgrade, we need to test some stuff, or we're getting this new feature.
You also have to change the way you communicate it, right? Because we're not removing the version number.
We're not, no.
Right? We're just I don't want to be cliche, but we're just saying Drupal, right? So the version number isn't being removed, right? It's just not being talked about in that way. Like, oh, you're on Drupal 9. You're on Drupal. It's an older version of Drupal, but you're on Drupal.
So I want to go back to that whole thing about Ubuntu and why they use version numbers. And I kind of want to just pivot a little bit to the really excellent example you have of macOS Classic, 9 and before, and OS 10 and what came after. Like, that was a major sea change. You're right. If you are running servers in a data center somewhere, and you happen to be using Mac Classic, you would have major considerations and major issues going to OS 10 to provide the very same website that you might be providing to your clients with the web server that you are using, right? So you might be upgrading from 9 to 10, but that might mean that you're upgrading Apache from 2.0 to 2.2 or 2.4 or whatever the version numbers are on that part. Those are considerations for you as a maintainer of the hardware, as a maintainer of the software, and the version numbers here are very important. But the website visitor who visits the website that's powered by Apache 2.0 or 2.4, they're not going to care. And what I think I'm saying here is that the equivalency to Drupal is that sea change between macOS 9 and macOS 10 is the equivalent of what you said between Drupal 7 and Drupal 8 or Drupal 10. And the user of the website that is powered by Drupal under the hood is not going to care. They just want the website. And the person buying the website from an agency is only going to care if it's very expensive to go from one version of Drupal to another, which is how it has been in the past and is no longer. And I think that cost is what allows us not to have to worry about the label of the version number in the marketing and what we sell to our clients. And hopefully that's clearer.
I think when you said, you're hitting on something, when you say agency, and also Nick, when you say, when I build and give a Drupal site to somebody, and I think I'm in a different context where I'm in a company which provides a platform, and a lot of the customers aren't given Drupal. They build it. They own it. It's their responsibility. They do need to think about breaking it when they change underlying versions, about dependencies breaking, because when they update to Drupal 10, a Symfony library might change, a module might change. So it is exactly the operating system model. So what this is really about is like, which context are you thinking of Drupal in? Yes. Are you being delivered Drupal either through an agency or through software as a service, and you don't have the responsibility of owning it? And that seems like it's all of your customers. Or like most of my customers, thousands and thousands of them, are you given a platform to run Drupal, but it is, unless you hire professional services, which is basically an internal agency, responsible for it. And the thing is, those people are buying right. Drupal. Though.
Those people are buying Drupal, though. You're right.
There are non-technical users buying Drupal that do need to think about it as their responsibility.
I think part of it too is, if you think about it, because I've been doing this for years. When I am selling Drupal, I'm selling Drupal. I do occasionally talk about versions. Like when we're like right now, new projects, I am talking about version because Drupal 11 is coming out in 3 months. So that means that project is going to be a bridge project. Like there's going to be some sort of negotiation of changing, and that's going to impact the project. So I do discuss it. But if it's in between, like 6 months ago, I didn't tell like any new clients. I didn't tell like, oh, like if they asked, it'd be like, yeah, it's Drupal 10, but it's like, that's a given. It's just Drupal 10. It's the newest version of Drupal. But I think part of the confusion might be is if they start to do some of their own research, they go to Drupal.org, the first thing they're going to see is Drupal 10.2, and they're going to be like, well, what is 10.2? What does that mean? Why do I care? And my understanding is that's what
just imagine if it wasn't there.
Yeah,
imagine if it was just the Drupal logo and didn't say 10.2 next to it.
Right.
Yeah. And I agree. In all contexts, it doesn't make sense to have it on Drupal.org's landing page. Whether like the end user is going to end up maintaining it or not, you don't need the landing page to say it.
No. That's part of my point. That's part of my point is like the marketing doesn't need it, but there are contexts in which it's important. And I've been focused on the developer context where it is important. But I think you've been focused on the platform component where it's very important. And like, absolutely, there are different lenses we should be worried about.
Like, to me, does it, and maybe I'm oversimplifying this and you guys can tell me if I am, but like it's a technical user versus a non-technical user, or more directly a technical developer type user, right? Because ultimately, like Matthew raises a great point, is that some users are technical enough to need to know that it's Drupal 11 versus Drupal 10, right?
I don't think it's technical. I think it's consumer versus producer. The consumer does not need to know about the version number. The producer does. And that analogy, I think, works for Matthew's organization, for Acquia, because they're producers, they're producing, they definitely need to be worried about it. I need to be worried about it, but our consumers don't.
So let's dive into that a little bit.
It's a great way to put it.
Yeah, it definitely is. Let's dive into that a little bit as far as the sales aspect goes, right? Because earlier on, Ivan, you said that when you're selling Drupal, you don't need to hit people with a version number.
Not anymore.
Not anymore, right? Fair. We just heard from Nick that, depending on where the project falls in Drupal's release schedule, he may actually bring up version number, right? To kind of like soften the blow of a potential upgrade, right? I'm wondering, like, if you don't talk about version number in the sales process, how do you talk to people that are already on Drupal, right? When somebody comes to you and says, hey, I have a Drupal site and I want you to work on it, immediately to me, my first question is like, okay, well, what version of Drupal is that? And the answer might be from that person, I don't know. Like, you're the expert, figure it out. How do you approach that conversation?
That's a great question. So first of all, I want to say it's really hard to sell Drupal to people who haven't used it before. Like, that battle from a small agency perspective is much harder than clients who've either used Drupal before, know about it, or are currently on it. So most of the effort and focus that we have is on clients that are some experience with Drupal. So the people that come to us or that we go after either have an existing Drupal site or a legacy Drupal site. The conversations are very different. Depending on where they are, it's either we should consider extending the life of your Drupal 7 site with hero devs, and because you have a very complex site and you need more time than the 7 months that are left of this year, or it's a site that is 8, 9, or 10. In my experience, it's mostly been 10, but it is 8, 9, or 10. And we talk about getting them to the most secure version of Drupal. And we consider that discussion based on an audit of the site. We can't you can't say, oh, it's going to cost $5,000 if it's on Drupal 8.0. It's probably not. There's probably complexity that requires us to spend more than $5,000 worth of work to get you to the latest version of Drupal. But if it's on Drupal 10, usually it's a non-brainer, like it's a non-starter. Like, we'll just upgrade you to the latest version, and we'll either eat the cost or it'll like be a part of the service that we provide. And I want our clients not to have to worry about what version of Drupal they're on, because it just causes consternation about budgets. And like,
so you're not even asking the question. When you're talking to a, for lack of a better word, non-technical client, right? You're not saying, hey, what version of Drupal are you on? You're asking more about the whole project, as opposed to.
I want to not involve any jargon I can when I want to be as clear and as empathetic as I can with clients like that. So I'm not going to say, what version are you on? Because they are likely not going to know if they're a marketing director or and I will ask things like, how long have you had this site? Oh, you've had it since 2011? Cool. Are you still with the same agency you were in? Oh yeah, we are. We just, we need a new agency. Or like, oh no, we rebuilt it 2 years ago, but we need a new theme. Well, 2 years ago. So they're probably on Drupal 10. Like, maybe they're on Drupal, like, depending on who built it. So I try to get at that stuff without actually talking about the version, because it's sometimes they'll offer me the version themselves. And at that point, that's an in to talk about it. But Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
stay away from that.
I honestly, no word of a lie, just feel like I learned something right there. Cause like I would just be like, yeah, what version are you on? And like your way is so much, I don't know, so much better.
Aw.
So what do you think are some of the other pitfalls that come from talking about version too much in projects or in sales? I mean, you just mentioned some budget concerns, but what are other concerns with mentioning version?
They create an us and them attitude and feeling. It's like, oh, we're talking about versions. Oh, that's technical. I'm already freaked out. I don't know what the version number is. Like, it's creating a divide that doesn't need to exist. Like, we're the technical experts. We should be talking to people and explaining our expertise in a way that those people that we're talking to are clearly non-technical will understand them. So like if we talk about version numbers, already our potential clients are sort of on their back foot, like especially if they're marketing people. And I do want to say, like, this is mostly in the sales and marketing process when you're talking to people who they just want a website that they can use, and their current website is Drupal, and that's about as much as they know. So yeah.
Do you think it causes, so you already said that they're kind of like on their back foot when you bring up version, right? If they're on an older version of Drupal, do you think in the back of their head, you know, when you start talking about versions, it kind of sets off maybe, I don't know, alarm bells or concerns about price and like, oh, he said Drupal 7, they're on Drupal 11. Like, this is going to cost me $1 bazillion. Like, I can see the dollar signs already. Do you think that's the case?
I do. I do think that people who have a Drupal 7 site or a legacy Drupal site know about it and know that it's an issue. And so they're prepared to talk about it, but they are afraid of what it's going to cost to get to the new version. We recently had a prospect come to us who found out last month, well, it would be March now, found out in March that they were on Drupal 7 and that Drupal 7 was going away and that they needed to do something before the end of the year. And they were really surprised and they were shocked. And this was as a result of not having a great communication with the people that was supporting their current site. And so now they had to scramble because they had to figure out how to come up with a budget to rebuild this site. And so for them, they knew about it and they needed to talk about it, but it would have been so much better had they been able to do this much earlier and not have to have that version
Scramble.
discussion. Yeah, and the scramble.
Well, I'm curious then, how do you because this is something that does come up fairly often, especially on clients that are on Drupal 7, and I'm going to say the version for now. But one of the things that happens is they independent of the end of life, they decide that they need a new site. And one of their stipulations would be, oh, I don't want Drupal. Drupal is bad. I have a bad taste in my mouth with Drupal. And a lot of the times I start the discussion like, well, you're on an older version. It's changed significantly since then. There are huge improvements. I'd love to demo that for you. Here's all the reasons why we should use it. How do you have that discussion without talking about version?
I don't have that discussion with them. Because that's an assumption that they need the next version and that I need to be able to sell them on the next version. So I take the approach of, oh, I'm so sorry that you've had such a bad experience. Would you be willing to show me where it hurts? Show me your pain and log into the site that you have and tell me the story of what makes you sad and why you think this is bad. And I try to have a human discussion about like what are the actual pay points as opposed to version numbers. And the approach at that point is then, okay, I can hear and I can see. Yeah, we sucked back then. That like we did our best and we tried our best, but honestly, like we didn't succeed. And you had better options that you could have gone with. And I know you think that you need to go there now, but would you give me a chance to show you what we can do now? And then I'll bring up an existing client that I know has an awesome experience and show that to them. And I won't talk about version numbers at all. I'll just say, okay, this is what we can do now. This is what we did then. Like, oh, by the way, this happens to be the latest version of Drupal. Like,
it also
and it
gives
has all the
you
goodness underneath.
it also gives you an opportunity if they say like, oh, I need, I don't know, X, Y, or Z feature, and Drupal doesn't do it or doesn't do it well, you can kind of shift to maybe something that's not Drupal, or maybe shift to something that is Drupal plus, right?
Right. A good example is a landing page integration. So the client might have this idea that they need to move to some system that is just landing page based, and like that's the reason why. Well, if you can determine that that's the origin, you can say, okay, well, you're still on a Drupal site. Your new one would be Drupal site. We have this great integration with lead pages. Look at how easy it is to create these landing pages, and you don't have to switch platforms. I think also giving them the opportunity to switch platforms is valid. Like, yeah, maybe that is a better choice for you as a business, and we might lose you as a client, and that's fine. But like, I'm not interested in selling the upgrade and selling the version upgrade. I'm interested in like the pain points that they have and fixing those.
I like that. I was just, as you were saying this, I think instead of modern Drupal, we should call it 7-Up. And especially now that 7-Up has been renamed to like Starry or something. They're not even using it anymore.
We talked about that at DrupalCon, right? That was you that I was talking about that?
Yeah, I was like, what the hell is Starry? And you told me, like, oh, it's 7-Up. I was like, I just thought some soda popped up on the market out of nowhere. I like 7-Up. I'm not sure about Starry. Sounds
does it taste the same, honestly? Like, I
didn't even try it. I wasn't willing to. See, they lost me. It's because they took the version number off of it.
There you go.
So, yeah, but I know the answer to half of this, which is, what should we call Drupal 7? But the second half of the question, I think, is maybe more important, is where do we call it? What the new name, and when? Is this a part of marketing? Is it on Drupal.org? Is it part of the Hero Dev NES program?
So I have an idea on this, and I don't know how, so we have to be planful, conscious, and really deliberate. And I think we have to start by separating documentation. And I think we need to do an archive.drupal.org, or even better, a legacy.drupal.org. And I think we have to start moving all of the Drupal 7 stuff to a legacy.drupal.org and put everything in one place so that we have the latest documentation and the latest resources and the latest reference material for Drupal 7 somewhere that is separate than Drupal, that will always be there, that hero devs can point to in 2027 when they're still providing never-ending support. Like, I know that Hero Devs, is supporting this episode. That's not why I keep bringing them up. I genuinely believe that they're part of the solution for the future. And so, like, it's important to mention that and to be realistic about that. And I think you call it Legacy Drupal. And on those pages, you have the version number in there somewhere. But when we refer to it in the community and in the discourse, we refer to it as Legacy Drupal.
So I have a maybe different suggestion, similar, but getting into the weeds of legacy.drupal.org. A long time ago, I worked a lot on the documentation on Drupal.org, and we made a lot of improvements. One of the improvements I've always wanted to make, which we didn't make, is to version it, like you're saying. Like, I love on Symfony's docs, you land on it, and it says you're on version, ironically, 7, current version, but you can switch and it will say unmaintained versions, or it could say legacy versions. So it's very clear you're shifting gears. It's not the defaults. And I actually think, jumping ahead, if we start talking about Starshot, I think we have a chance to define a new paradigm for documentation when we take the thing that Starshot creates and make the documentation for it, we could set that kind of precedent. So I'm excited for that. Similar to what you're saying, a little different.
It reminds me of the API documentation, because I feel that doesn't the API.drupal.org do something similar where you can kind of select a version? Yeah.
I was going to bring that up, but there's other issues with that. Like so often, like you either end up on 11, like recently I just started landing on 11.x API documentation and the pages are just empty. And then you try to switch a version and it says it doesn't exist. Or you end up on 8.9. I ended up on 8.9 all the time. That's a separate issue. But in theory, yes.
Yeah. It doesn't happen with Symfony, right? And that's actually about, do you have a docs team who's curating it? Or are you just auto code generated and wiki style, let's hope it turns out well, which is another kind of chip on my shoulder. But we'll get into that.
I like the idea of having that switch and making the versioning change in the documentation. I think that's I don't think there's any other way to do it. I think you have to do that. I'm still torn between actually separating the version 7 documentation from the actual documentation, because I see the value of like, oh, I meant to look at version 7 because that's what I'm interested in, and having that be easily accessible. But I'm also interested in like a self-contained archive and history of the stuff that isn't modern Drupal that someone has referred to.
Oh, you said it.
Wait a second. So I gotta ask, modern Drupal, is that like, no, we shouldn't do that, right?
No, just say Drupal.
Yeah, that feels icky to me too. But there are folks out there that are doing it.
I guess a swear jar for this, you know.
I know. Every time you say a version number, you put in $1. If you say modern, it's $20. Okay. So I know that the Drupal, the Drupal Association, has been working on marketing lately. Last DrupalCon, not Portland 2024, but DrupalCon 2023. They kind of announced a marketing team, and the marketing team has been working on, just that, marketing Drupal. I'm wondering, Ivan, have you talked to anybody on the marketing team about this? Have you like had conversations to the greater community about this?
No, I haven't. I posted in the promoting Drupal channel in the Slack, but didn't really get any traction there. I was supposed to be at the community summit to just say Drupal, and I was supposed to talk about that, but unfortunately I had some personal issues come up that I couldn't attend. And I was hoping that at DrupalCon I was going to be able to talk to the marketing team, but it was not able to. So as a result, the answer is unfortunately not. So if there are marketing folk out there that are listening to this, or know marketing folk that are on the Drupal marketing team, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be very happy to talk to you.
So great segue. I know you weren't at DrupalCon, but they unveiled a new brand guide in the Grease note. And it doesn't have version numbers. I guess that wasn't you, but do you think that was intentional?
Absolutely, that's intentional. And I think I alluded to this a little bit in the pre-show, which was like brand and marketing is fundamental to who you are as an organization. It's connected to your mission, to your vision, and that kind of stuff shouldn't be changed incrementally and shouldn't really have version numbers on it. It is what it is. So Drupal Blue is Drupal Blue. We're not going to update the brand guide in 6 months and change it to a different shade. So it is our brand guide. It is the latest. And when we change as an organization and we need to make changes, we will update the brand guide. Yeah. Like maybe there's a footer, like light gray somewhere, like that says
slippery slope. 1. Don't give in.
No, I'm not giving in from that perspective. But that's a release change, right? That's a change log. That's the same as keeping version numbers on Drupal core and the code base itself. But from like a version of the brand guide, no version. I like that. And by the way, it looks great. I love that it's all in one place.
Yeah, it's very impressive the way it's organized. I enjoyed looking through it. I'm going to open a small can of worms.
Uh-oh.
And I'm going to ask, What
We would expect nothing less.
What do you think about Drupal Starshot?
I have thoughts, and they are just my opinion. So please remember that. I think as an initiative, it's an amazing idea to create a version of a release of, a snapshot of, a recipe of, a package of Drupal that has the latest and greatest UX experience. Yes, we should absolutely be doing that. In my opinion, it should not be a separate thing than Drupal. I understand why it's a separate thing, though.
Why do you think it is?
For various political and velocity reasons. I think as an organization, Dries would like Drupal to move faster because he sees that that's where the market requires us to be. And I believe that we can't do that as a community because everybody has an opinion, and rightfully so. We are an egalitarian community where everyone's voice is important, and that's been one of the major drawing things that people are drawn to in the community, and we should continue to enable that. But from a business perspective, that is completely the opposite of what you need to move fast. And so having a parallel version of Drupal, as is in the press release, those are the words that are used, and saying that it's not a fork, assuming that people who are reading this press release understand what a fork is not the right approach, in my opinion. It is literally saying we are parallel to Drupal. We don't want to evolve Drupal into this parallel thing, and we don't have a plan for how to put them together, at least from my understanding. Yeah. I wasn't at DrupalCon. I read the press release, so maybe there is a plan.
So, yeah, I know quite a bit about the plan.
I love it.
So, I mean, I feel like I can't not answer because I'm
I would love to know the answers. Yeah.
I have to start by saying, in somehow a politically correct, sensitive way, that I don't think that press release did a great job of describing the plan or the intentions. You know, like the word choice, as you're saying, with fork and parallel. I don't think that was like vetted or, you know, carefully considered. And so I think it's misrepresentative.
Okay.
It's, you know, in a way, the Drupal.org landing page that was mocked up in the Dries note, like parallel, like there were two things on the same side, but really, and this is talking to Dries about this for a long time, like he has thought of it, and we as a larger group have thought of it as a layer. You know, it's a layered approach where Drupal core is a layer that is more stripped down. It's more Spartan. It's, you know, less assumptions. It's something you might choose if you're an expert and you say, I want to kind of start more from scratch because I'm comfortable with that. And Starshot is a layer on top that says, I'm going to make some more assumptions. I'm going to use all the same stuff, but I'm just going to pre-package some things for you. It's not in parallel because it continues to use the latest version of Drupal core. And in fact, it may kind of be a front runner in that, you know, you may take things from that top layer and decide to move them down into core. So I think parallel is wrong and fork is wrong. And
it's not
the best
Drupal
word,
though, right?
I mean, it is.
So, like the way that I frame it, and Matthew, we're going to have a show about this next week. Surprise, everybody! We're going to talk about this as well as Experience Builder. But just so in preparation for that show, the way I look at it is, you have Drupal, right? The Drupal we all know and love, right? And then, you know, Starshot is really just a recipe that gets applied that allows you to install a certain set of modules and configurations, whether it's contrib or core, right? That give you a richer, more opinionated, for lack of a better word, experience that you can then, you know, start working with, right?
I think that's right.
I think I think my initial reaction was closer to Ivan's, but as I thought, because and my concern is less about the marketing side or dilution side. My concern was more
Oh.
about spreading the core team thin, burnout, that kind of thing,
Well,
because it's
so
a
I don't
huge
think
initiative.
I
But
think we can shelf some of this
yeah,
conversation, but
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know that necessarily happens, right? Because the core
Well,
team is still going to work on core.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
but
explicitly intended. It is not core. It is not the same governance model. It is not necessarily, unless they want to, the same
well,
people. Some of them will want to.
yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I realized is that it's meant to be like this is the opinionated version of installed, and it solves an issue that I'm currently dealing with an agency right now. I have an agency client that is starting to onboard a lot more Drupal stuff. You know, they're traditionally more WordPress heavy. And one of the things that they're trying to figure out is, you know, every agency has their own flavor of Drupal. They have their own set of modules that they install to make the experience better. You know, some use field groups, some don't. Some use paragraphs layout, some don't. Some use layout builder, some don't. Like every single agency has their own opinion. And this agency is fairly new to Drupal, and they're trying to figure out what their opinion is. And I'm helping guide them through that. But like one of the problems is there's so much you have to put together to make one specific flavor and then changing that to another. If you have something like Starshot, which my understanding is like the ability, like there's a whole, we'll talk about this next week, I think, but one of the ideas is it's an opinionated, really good UX for content editors and site maintainers. It's a starting point that can very easily be like, the conversation no longer is, well, the core experience out of the box for Drupal for content editors isn't great, but we can do a lot to make it nice. Now it's like, well, here's Starshot. This is the great experience. We
It's
can tweak
nice. You can
things if we
change it.
want to, but this is what's considered a gold standard or a standard experience in Drupal.
Yes.
I also
can't
despise. Go ahead, Ivan.
Why can't that just be at the head of the Drupal repo?
So I think people use Drupal for different things, right? So like going back to what we've been like, first of all, I think the word opinionated is you know, it has negative connotations that are, you know, I don't love. So like I'm not going to say opinionated, or I'm going to try not to. But like I think people use Drupal for different things, right? So like let's take the example of me. I'm building a new headless Drupal site, right? I take Drupal off the shelf. I don't really need all the stuff that Starshot is proposing, right?
Yeah.
I just need JSON API. I need like, you know, some other, maybe another set of recipes, maybe like, I don't know, Drupal API recipe set, whatever it's called, you know, I'm going to go down that road. Right. I think, you know, if you look at Drupal core, you look at the recipes initiative that's now in Drupal 11, or is it? Yeah, it's 11, right? Not 10.3. Anyway,
Actually, it might be in 10.3.
Somebody will send me a message, right? But like, if you look at that, like recipes are the way of the future, right? To Nick's point, like a lot of people have created distributions on Drupal. Distributions are super opinionated, right? So much so you can't actually move away from them easily, right? You know, I think where this is powerful is that you still have Drupal as the base. All of the good stuff, right, that you may build as part of Starshot could be included in core in some ways. You know, we're going to talk about experience builder. That's the right term, right, Matthew? Next week. And that's something that's going to be kind of like built into core, I think, right? That's the idea, right? Kind of next level layout builder, if you will, right? Like things will start making it into core, right? But I think the recipe aspect of this to say, hey, if I install the Starshot recipe and like I get a fully functional Drupal site that does 99.5% of what I want it to do for a user that is less technical, not using Drupal in a very specific use case, right? So, I mean, I think it's early days. I think we have to kind of see where it goes, but you know, cautiously optimistic.
I think there's a couple other reasons why, good reasons why it isn't just on top of core immediately, and that is Drupal core has significant gates for
Yeah.
the quality of code tests and things like that and discussion.
Mhm.
So Starshot, they're allowed to make, I think allows them to make, first of all, they can include contrib in it, which core explicitly can't do because it's core. If it includes something, it's in core. It allows them to make decisions like, for example, even just like paragraphs, right? Paragraphs kind of is the go-to multi-field entity in the community, but there's also custom field, there's also storage, there's also like, there's key value field, like there's so many others that kind of do the same thing. And paragraphs has drawbacks, storage has drawbacks, like they all have drawbacks. Deciding which one should be in core, like moving something like paragraphs to core would be a multi-year effort because it's such a complex ecosystem, right? But including it as part of Starshot as a representative distribution is probably a no-brainer.
Yeah, and Ivan said, he said velocity correctly.
Yeah.
He said velocity is one of the reasons for it. You're absolutely right. And yeah, Nick, you're kind of expanding us with a detail on why that's the case.
So I'm gonna put a pin in this because we are gonna have a whole episode about it next week.
But Ivan has an opinion.
Can I
But
please
before-
be in that show? Please, can you invite me back to that show?
Maybe.
No,
I was actually going to
the
give you
answer's
the last word.
Oh.
So because
Oh.
I wanted to make sure that see if you had anything else to say here before we moved on, Ivan.
Um.
And no is okay too.
Oh, I have something to say. I love this community. I really do. I love the leadership. I love how we evolve, how we can have hard conversations, how we can express our opinions and criticisms and not like be shunned for that. I think that's amazing. I do worry about the communication and what the outside world thinks when they see Drupal and Drupal Starshot and the level of complexity I now have to try to explain to people that I want to use Drupal. Because I guarantee that over the next few months, as we have conversations with our existing clients and we try to sell to new clients, they are all going to ask me about what Starshot is and how it's going to affect them. And those are fair questions. It just makes it harder to sell. It shouldn't. It should do the opposite, right? Because we're going to have this amazing UX experience, and we're modernizing quickly, fast. But it is going to be a little harder.
I feel like that hits the nail on the head because for me, I think it goes back to the communication framing because like the Dries note framed it as like the space race, which was also framed as like we need to do this to win or else we're going to lose against something. And if we don't, whereas it could have been framed as like we need to be able to showcase the power of Drupal is out of the box for somebody, which is what it is. And I think it's something that
I think we're going to
needs.
lose. We're up against something and we're going to lose.
Listen, I think Starshot could also, right? So like I think it could also be used in such a way where it's a competitor to something like Squarespace, right? And you're shaking your head no, but listen, that is, in my opinion, and we are so far off topic right now, but that's all right. In my opinion, that's where Drupal is losing market share, right? So like if this recipe builds on the strong core that Drupal already has, right? And it's able to be turned into a platform as a service offering, right? That will do quite a few things for Drupal. One, it'll make us more competitive in the marketplace, right? Two, it will bring in new community members with new ideas and new ambitions and innovations, right? And last but not least, it'll help us to compete with not just Squarespace but WordPress and other CMSs that have kind of that push button service, right? It doesn't mean that like, oh, people are going to stop using Drupal. It just means that could be a gateway into Drupal for people to say, oh, I have this simple Drupal site. If I push this button, I get a Drupal instance, right? And then the next time they need an enhancement or an improvement, now they're going to Nick, they're going to Ivan, they're going to an agency to get that improvement or potentially build that site into something greater.
I have two things. One, I think Squarespace is a race to the bottom and we shouldn't be going there.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think we can compete with that anymore. I think we should be focusing on the user experience for the product for everyone, especially the people that are using it now and those that are likely to come to us in the future. I think Squarespace won. I think Wix won. Like, I don't think we can do anything at that volume, at that kind of market. And that's one thing. And the second thing is, I think that the problem I see with Starshot and Drupal being separate is the fact that they're separate and talked about as parallel.
Let me ask you.
There's an easy way to fix that. Hold on.
Okay,
There's an easy way to fix that. If we were able to say that Starshot is where we want Drupal to be, and do so explicitly, as opposed to say it's a parallel thing that you can choose one or the other, I think that makes a much more compelling argument.
But so I think we're all kind of saying the same thing, maybe, because Matthew did say that parallel was not a good word use, right?
Yeah.
So if we think about it as Drupal core with the Starshot recipe, like it's the same thing. You're just using a certain configuration.
So
imagine I'm a marketing client. What does recipe mean to me? I see two different things.
So you're going to have that problem regardless of Starshot moving forward, right? Because recipes is something that's going to be added to core or has already been added to core, right? And then there's going to be future forward, there's going to be a recipe browser in Drupal that people are going to be able to kind of pull these things down and install them into their Drupal site, right?
I think there are metaphors that marketers can understand. But first, John, like what you're saying, that's the internal view, and it's fine as the internal view. It's a layer, it's a recipe, it's not parallel,
right,
etc. I don't think that's how we should talk to marketers about it. We could, and I can think of some ways to do it, like, hey, do you want a Blue Apron box full of the ingredients in exactly the right sizes that you throw together, or do you want to go to the grocery store, or do you want to buy a car that has all of the options pre-configured,
right,
or do you want to choose a la carte and put it together? Like, there's ways you can do it, but
that's the producer view that you were talking about.
I want to point out that Dries intentionally said, well, first of all, this is just a mock-up of Drupal.org. Secondly, we haven't named it yet. So Starshot is the initiative. We could choose to just call it Drupal.
I forgot about that.
And and call the other thing Drupal core, or like something that's a developer thing that you don't talk to marketers about. So it's like, here's Drupal framework, here's Drupal core off to the side. This one's Drupal. Like, that's still an option that hasn't actually been decided.
I forgot about that. You're right.
I love that idea.
I love
that idea.
I also like the fact that you highlighted there that Dries showed developers a mock-up and didn't expect people to lose their minds, because that's like, anytime you show that mock-up, man, people are going to consider that
that can be totally different. So this is a great conversation to have, and maybe we should go talk to Dries and the DA and the marketing team and be like, hey, let's talk about what Starshot should be called, because that is explicitly undefined right now.
Yeah.
And on that note, moving back to, I think Matthew indirectly just gave us a segue back to our primary topic here, which is, I
think I'm going to let you do it. I had more to say. I'm just going to let you segue to the end.
Which is appreciated here, right? So if we are just saying Drupal, right? Where do we go from here, Ivan? How do we get people involved? Where can people kind of voice their opinions on what we've talked about today?
I wish I could say there was a place you could sign up and support the project by making a comment or a testimonial or but there isn't. You can go to justsaydrupal.org. Right now, that'll redirect you to the blog post I wrote with my, full idea of why this is something we should do. At the bottom of the post, there are some links. There's one to the issue queue where there is an actual issue about this that Nick started a long time ago. Well, a few months ago. It feels like a long time ago. Leave your comments and opinions there. Like that's the traditional way of doing things in our community. So do that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a LinkedIn post. If you feel like you want to comment on that, feel free to do that. I welcome email. Send me an email. Let me know that you're interested in talking about this, evolving it. I am planning on having coming up with a talk right about this. I mean, that was the whole point of trying to get to DrupalCon, and I will likely be submitting it to most of the camps over the next year. So I'm going to try to do the kind of discourse and have the kind of discourse that I think is important. But if there's anyone in the Drupal Association or who are part of any teams that think this is something we should talk about anymore, please feel free to reach out to me.
Well, Ivan, as always, thank you for joining us. It has been an enlightening conversation, and I look forward to your next appearance.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Do you have questions or feedback? You can reach out to Talking Drupal on Twitter with the handle Talking Drupal, or by email with show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts and other listeners on Drupal Slack in the Talking Drupal channel.
You can promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. Learn more at talkingdrupal.com/tdpromo.
Get the Talking Drupal newsletter to learn more about our guest hosts, show news, upcoming shows, and much more. You can sign up for the newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
Thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choosing that Become a Patron button in the sidebar. Alrighty, as we bring this show to a close, Ivan, if folks wanted to get a hold of you, how could they go about doing that?
The best way to do that is to go to 107.com/Ivan, TEN7.com/IVAN. My contact information is there. That's the best way to do it.
There you go. Matthew, what about you?
I am Grasmash, GRASMASH on Drupal.org. And one other call to action, you can go to Drupal.org/Starshot. And if you have an opinion on what it should be named, you can put a pledge in there and say you want to be involved in the marketing or branding and make your voice heard.
Nick Laughlin, what about you?
You can find me online pretty much everywhere at Nixman, NICXVAN.
And I'm John Picozzi. You can find me on all the major social networks and Drupal.org at John Picozzi. And you can find out about EPAM at EPAM.com.
And if you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking. See you guys next week.
Take it easy, everyone.